Hello, and welcome to our first session on using Blender 3.5's Compositor for video editing. With all these videos we have in this Blender playlist, pretty much everything has been about video editing, and most of it within the video sequence editor. We've seen other editors. We've worked with the graph editor to handle animation. More recently, we've looked at the movie clip editor for masking and motion tracking. And those all worked in a fairly similar manner, but what we're going to see today is that the Compositor is a bit of a different beast. So to get started with the Compositor, we are going to spend this whole session just getting comfortable, understanding the layout of it, how the different pieces work and how you interact with the Compositor. And to help us with that objective, we will do something simple, applying a mask to a video file. And what we'll see fairly quickly is that there are differences between working with the video sequence editor compared to the Compositor. One being that within the video sequence editor, it's pretty much what you see is what you get. When you see your preview as you're working, that's pretty much what's going to get rendered out. With the Compositor, it actually distinguishes those two pieces, and we'll see that shortly. All right, so before we get into the Compositor, let's take a look at what we have in terms of sample media. What we're going to do in this example is we're going to show how you can apply a mask to a movie file. So I've already got the mask set up. That's over here under masking. So there it is. I have an ant here, and I have a mask that is following it along the screen. And within the video sequence editor, the way we apply that mask is we go over here under the modifiers, and we add a mask modifier, and we just specify the mask, and it's done. So very straightforward process to do inside of the VSE, and we are going to replicate this inside of our Compositor. So let's go ahead and get started. Our first step is to add a compositing workspace. So we'll click the plus sign, and under VFX, choose compositing. And here we go. We have a new workspace to learn. We've seen a lot of these things before. So let's start with some of the more familiar items. Over here in the bottom right, this is our usual properties editor. So right here, this is the output properties where we would go if we wanted to change the resolution, the frame rate, frame range. Down here, we can see our timeline editor. Over here is the dope sheet, good for looking at keyframes. And up at the top right, this is the outliner. I have never needed to use this for video editing, so we can safely ignore that. And this big chunk of space here is being taken up by our Compositor. This is where we will do pretty much all of our work. So now that we've gotten a quick intro to this space, let's go ahead and adjust a few things. I'm going to shrink down the dope sheet editor. I will not be using that today. I do want to have that visible, and we'll just ignore these bits for now. Now, before we get started, I want to create a new scene, because normally I like to have my work inside of the Compositor in a separate scene from anything I have inside of the video sequence editor. Because we're going to be doing the same thing that we did in the video sequence editor, you can see we've already got it configured. So I'll just take a copy of this scene. So I'm clicking on this button here, going to copy settings, and there we go. Now I have my new scene. I'll go ahead and name this. I'll call it demo. Okay, and we are good to get started. The first thing we need to do inside of the Compositor is click this checkbox titled Use Nodes. As soon as we do that, these two things pop up. These are nodes, and pretty much everything we do inside of the Compositor is going to be working with nodes. Very tiny. Like other editors, we can press the home key and it'll zoom. We can use the mouse wheel to zoom in and out as we need it to. And let's talk about what we see here. The idea here is that everything inside of the Compositor is a node that can have inputs, outputs, or both. In this case, this one on the left is an input node, meaning it can provide input to other nodes and it doesn't take anything. It only has these circles on its right side. These circles, they're called sockets. It's got 2 of them, meaning it has 2 different things that it can deliver to other nodes to be worked on. We don't actually need this one, so what I'm going to do is left click on this and go to node and delete. We also have that X shortcut just like everywhere else. This other node here we do need to keep. This is the composite node. This is the node that you would need to generate your final output, whether that's rendering a video file out onto disk or as the output that you're going to use inside of the video sequence editor by bringing this scene in as a scene strip. So we definitely want to hold on to that. And to continue with this tutorial, the idea is we're going to put a mask on a movie clip. So let's add that movie clip in right now. We'll go to the Add menu, and you can see it's got a bunch of different groups of different nodes that you can add. Anytime you're bringing something into the Compositor, that's basically an input. So we're going into the input grouping, and here we find movie clip. So we click on that, and now you'll see that something is attached to my mouse cursor. This is the movie clip node. I just need to pick a spot and left click, and that places it. So now we have our movie clip node, and you can see it has a bunch of different outputs to it. This one is the key one that we need to work with. This is basically what is showing inside of the movie when we open it up, which we can do by clicking this button. So I'll click that now. I'll go to my sources and select my ant video. And there you go. Once I've done that, a little tiny preview shows up here. It's super small, but at least it's something. Now, over here on the right side, if we go up to node and expand this out, you can see any options that are over here are also visible over here. So I could have also clicked over here and clicked this button here to access that file dialog box to choose the video file to open. So now that I have my movie clip node here inside the Compositor, the next thing to do is to connect it to the Composite. If that's all I wanted to do, if I just wanted to take my movie clip and then render that out, this is the way to do it. So click with your left mouse button and drag, so you have this line forming over to the input socket of the Composite. And that's pretty much how it goes. Like, you bring in different nodes and then you connect up the different sockets. So far we've done a few steps, but we still don't really see much besides this tiny little thumbnail over here. So the good news is we can add a different node that is specifically used to see what you're working on, and that is the viewer node. So I will hold down on Shift A, which is our standard shortcut for adding, and here within the output grouping, this one at the bottom, viewer, we'll click on that, and before I do anything else, you'll see that the screen has turned black over here within our editor, and that's because now the background is basically going to be linked to whatever the viewer node is getting as its input. I'll left click to place that, and now I'm going to click and drag a line from that same image output socket from movie clip node into the image socket over here. And there you go. Now we can see something. We can see because this backdrop is turned on by default. If I click that, then it all disappears. But it's nice to be able to see things. So let's click that back on. And we can tell just by the size of that ant compared to that little speck over there that obviously we're a bit zoomed in. So to change that, we can go over here to View, and then we can click the Fit button. Clicking that, and then now there we go. It's like pressing the home key, except it's not pressing the home key. because pressing the home key resizes your set of nodes. If you want to use something, a hotkey like the home key, but for the background, it's actually Alt Home. So let me show you that a little bit. I'll use this and just adjust, because you can click and drag here to adjust zoom. So bring it back to this size, and I'll press Alt Home, and there you go. There's also the options for offsets, so you can shift things around. If I wanted to, I can move things around in the background, which you may find that you're going to have to do, because as you start zooming in so you can actually see the nodes you're working with, what I often find is that the nodes kind of get in the way of the background. So then I'll have to start playing around with the zoom of the background or shifting the offsets. You can also click on move here to do that. And that's a few ways to manipulate the background. You also have some other hotkeys. So we've seen the Alt Home. You can also hold down on Alt and use the middle mouse button, and that also works for adjusting the offset for panning around for the background. And finally, you can press on a V to zoom out, or Alt V to zoom in. So there you go. That's a bunch of different hotkeys for you for working with the background. But now that we have our viewer node in place, now is a good time to again reiterate that what we see in the background can be different from what actually gets rendered out, what is the true output of our scene, because these are two different nodes. And some things that I like to do sometimes is to have the viewer node just pointing to what I'm working on at the moment. If I'm tweaking something, I've already established a whole bunch of nodes, but I'm going back to maybe a node in the middle. You can attach the viewer to anything. And in fact, you can attach it to more than just this one output socket here. If I wanted to, I could click from the alpha and then drag that over to see what that looks like. But it'll be all white because the alpha channel is going to be a pure white in this case. If there is a node that has multiple outputs, you can connect any one of them if you wanted to, and you can work with the different outputs connecting to the different inputs of the various nodes that you have inside of your workspace. It is actually a lot of fun. It's like playing connect the dots. One final thing before I forget, there is a very handy shortcut to attach the viewer node to a specific node inside of the editor. And that is by holding down on Control and Shift, and then left clicking on the node that you want to attach the viewer to. So I'm going to click that now, and you can see by clicking multiple times on the same node, it'll automatically switch between the different outputs that are available from that node. So a very handy feature, saves a ton of time. All right, so we've seen all that. We're getting the hang of how this works. Let's continue with trying to get this thing masked. The mask actually counts as its own input. To bring it into our editor, I will press Shift-A to add, and I'll go into input again because it is an input, and I will choose mask. Okay, and now I'll have to find a free space here, and well, I don't need to. I could really put it anywhere I want, but trying to keep it a little bit cleaner than I keep my desk. So I'm going to put it over here on an empty spot. And if I go back up to node here, again, you can see the options here match over to here. I'll zoom in a bit, and this time I'll just click over here, and I will choose the only mask that exists here, because I've only created one. There we go. It is the ant mask. It has been selected. If we wanted to look at it, here, let's do that. Control, Shift, left click on this. There we go. That's the mask, and you can see it's exactly the right spot where it needs to be. And you know what? This gives us a nice clean look, so maybe we'll keep this for now and move on. So the final step in terms of applying the mask to the movie clip is to use another node, which is called set alpha. So let's go ahead and add that now. I'll press Shift A again. And oh, here we go. Under converter, set alpha. Oh, and by the way, I may have showed it already, but if you can't find something, because there are many different groups here, you can always click here and just start typing what you're looking for. So I know it's called set, so I'll type set. And then there it is, the first option, set alpha. So I'll click that. And this time, I want to show you something interesting. Notice here how right now that line connecting the movie clip to the composite nodes is yellow. If I hover this set alpha node over it, it changes to white. What that means is when I let go, it will automatically adjust, reconnect the different lines we have. So now movie clip node is connected to set alpha, and set alpha is connected to composite. It's a very nice, handy feature. I'm going to shift things around. And what else do I need to do? So I have my movie clip node feeding into the set alpha. And here is my mask, which I need to point over to the second input socket of the set alpha node. Before I do that, let's go ahead and attach the viewer to the set alpha just to see what it looks like right now. So there you go. It looks pretty much just like the movie file. And that's because if you don't attach anything to the input socket over here, it takes a default value of 1, which it means fully visible. In other words, like no transparency or anything. Okay, so now we've got our movie clip feeding our set alpha, so it's getting its image data, the picture essentially, from our movie. And we have our viewer already attached to set alpha, so we can see what set alpha is doing. And right now it's not really doing anything. Now the final thing we're going to do is attach the mask output socket from here over into this empty socket for set alpha. And as soon as we do that, there you have it. We have applied the mask. This is now the output of our set alpha after having taken the input from movie clip as its image and the ant mask as its alpha. And because we have it connecting to both the composite and the viewer, what we see here in the background is what we are going to render out. And one last thing before I forget, you may have noticed that these things can actually be anywhere. They don't have to go from left to right. It certainly looks better that way, but I could put the viewer all the way over here if I want, and it's going to do some funky bending just to make it work with that line. But it doesn't change anything, just all visual here. But I do like to see things from left to right, so I'll put it back in that placement. And this is essentially it. This is how we apply a mask inside of the Compositor. So before we finish up here, let's also put a color in the background. So just so that it does exactly the same thing that we saw in the video editing workspace, which was, oh yes, and that reminds me, notice how as I switch between these different workspaces, the scene doesn't change. When you like to have specific scenes associated with specific workspaces, what you might want to do is turn on this pin option here. By turning that on, Blender will remember which scene you're currently working with for every single one of these workspaces. So now it's attaching demo scene to compositing, and when I go to video editing and I change it to scene, it will remember that. So now I'm going to keep flipping between compositing and video editing. You'll see it remembers what I'm using for each one, which is a very handy feature. Anyway, so as I was saying, over here I had it some kind of pinkish background. So let's do that over here in compositing to finish off this example. So we have our set alpha, and that is what we need. Now we need that color, that pink color. To bring it in is also, again, an input node. So I will add input. And this time, we don't actually have something that's called color. We don't have like in VSE we had the color strip. Instead, we'll go to image and just place it over here. And if I go over here, it's easier to see over here. Under properties, what was the options? I think we have to click on new to create new image, and I'll just pick the color, and I will set a color like that. Okay, move the mouse away to get that to disappear. I also probably need to get the resolutions here to match, so I'll just go ahead and type that in, 1920 by 1080, and that should be it. So I'll hit OK, and there we go. It has generated that pink rectangle. Now to get these two things to work together, we need one more node. It's called the alpha over. So I will press Shift A to add the node, and I'll go to color, say alpha over, there it is, click that, and I will bring it down over here in this space. Okay, and with this in place, let me zoom in a bit here and pan. Okay, so I am going to take this image output from our image and put that as the first option. And I will also at this time just press Control Shift and left click on the alpha over so we can see what it sees. Okay, no problem. Right now it just sees white, but I think once we attach the image output from set alpha, then we'll be in business. So let's go ahead and do that. Put that on the second one. And there you go. So this was the correct sequence. So having the background as the first image input, and then the thing to show on top of the background as the second. Just to see what happens, let's go ahead and try to reverse these. See what that does. Yeah, nothing useful. So definitely a lot of getting used to working with the compositor is just messing around and seeing what happens. Because don't worry, like if things go really wrong, you can always undo by pressing Control Z like we normally do, right? Control Z, Control Z, there we go, fixed. So that's pretty much it. I mean, let me go ahead and if you're like me, then you like things looking nice and neat. So I'm going to go ahead and adjust these a little bit and try not to cross the wires. So I notice this one should be on top. If I wanted to do it that way, bring that down. That way it doesn't go all weird. Oh, and we're not done. Okay, so we're not actually done because this is a problem I run into quite often. I don't learn my lesson because what we see here is actually what is being fed into the viewer node, and the viewer node, as I said before, is distinct from the composite node. If we were to try to use this right now, what we would actually get as a result is what is coming out of set alpha, which is really just the ant with the mask applied, not with the pink background. What we would need to do to really finish this off is to connect the output of alpha over into the composite. But just before I do that, let's go ahead and prove that. I'll go back into video editing. I'll create a copy of this scene. And I'll just call this usage. Jump to the start, and I will add a scene. Okay, and that's the demo scene we've been working on. And where is it? Oh, right, it's somewhere later on inside the video. Yeah, there you go. So you can see it is just the ant with the mask applied. So we'll pop back over to compositing, and this time we will connect the dots here from alpha over, which is our true final point here in terms of our node workflow. Now Composite is going to our alpha over. So if we go back to video editing, and I might have to press Control R to refresh. There it is. That is how you apply a mask to a movie file within the Compositor. Okay, so that's it for today. This was our introduction into the Compositor. Hope you did like this. If you did, please do give this a like and consider subscribing so you can see more content when it comes. Thanks and bye now.
This year, our members have put more things on top of other things than ever before.
Meanwhile...